in the shadows of Scandinavian history. Few monarchs have unraveled quite like Eric XIV of Sweden, crowned in glory, descended from warriors, and poised to lead a golden age. He instead spiraled into a nightmare of delusion, fear, and bloodshed. This was not a king who lost his throne in battle, nor one who died a martyr's death. Eric's story is one of whispers behind palace walls, of trembling servants and poisoned bowls, a brilliant mind consumed by its own brilliance, until there was nothing left but a madman in a cell, clutching at his crown of dust. In this video, we plunge into the chaotic reign of Eric XIV of Sweden, the golden-haired monarch who began his rule with poetry and promise, and ended it mumbling to himself in a locked cell after a lunch that might have included just a little too much arsenic. The golden beginning. Eric was not born to fail. He was born to Gustav Vasa, the great liberator of Sweden, a father who had broken the country free from Danish rule and expected his sons to behave like proper kings, not melancholic artists. Eric, however, fancied himself a philosopher king. He read, he wrote, he painted. He was a Renaissance prince in the icy north. Tall, clever, handsome, and devastatingly good at inventing new titles for himself. He styled himself King of Sweden, Goths, whence Grand Duke of Finland, and occasional genius. But all that intellect came with a price, because while his crown sparkled in the sun, his thoughts began to cloud. Courtly madness, the king who trusted no one. At first, the court of King Eric XIV shimmered with potential. There were balls lit by candlelight, noblemen in embroidered doublets, and scholars quoting Cicero over roast goose. Eric himself sat on a throne like a man plucked from the pages of a Renaissance epic, a philosopher king who painted, wrote poetry, and debated astronomy with priests between royal edicts. But as the years ticked by, that gleaming surface began to crack. Eric didn't just suspect betrayal. He expected it. He didn't just fear conspiracies. He saw them, lurking behind every curtain, whispering behind every fan, dancing through his dreams at night. The king had become suspicious. At first, it was subtle. He began avoiding meetings. Then, he replaced his closest advisors with yes-men, who agreed that yes, the wind did sound like it was plotting treason. He accused servants of whispering secrets into loaves of bread. He claimed his horses were being bribed to throw him. He once stopped a parade because he was convinced that a child in the crowd had blinked too suspiciously. Eric's descent into paranoia didn't come with screams or curses. It came with silence. Cold, calculating silence. He would walk into a room and suddenly stop, eyes narrowed, as if the very furniture had insulted him. He scribbled notes at midnight, raving about betrayal in shadows that moved on their own. He started locking his bedroom from inside, sometimes even hiding under the bed with a sword, just in case his dreams turned out to be accurate intelligence reports. Then came the charts. Oh, yes, the treason charts. Eric began keeping meticulous records of who might betray him, complete with names, family trees, dates of suspected glances, and a complicated numerical system that only made sense to him. One chart reportedly listed a nobleman's crime as standing confidently during royal procession. Another, too quiet at dinner, possible plotting. His council was terrified, but no one dared speak, because the king's paranoia came with a blade, sharp, swift, and frequently used. At the heart of this madness were the nobles. Nobility, to Eric, was a disease, a hereditary condition that made people smug, ambitious, and dangerously entitled. He believed they were born conspiring. And among them, none were more dangerous, at least in his eyes, than the Stures, one of the most powerful families in Sweden. They were rich. They were influential. And worst of all, they looked very calm, which to Eric meant they were definitely hiding something. He began trailing them with spies, questioning their loyalty in public, and refer to them only by nicknames like that tall liar or the probably poisonous one. He interrogated their friends, inspected their food, and, according to one chronicler, even tried to decipher their handwriting for signs of sedition. By this point, Eric wasn't ruling a court. He was hosting a masquerade of fear, suspicion, and whispered prayers. But the true horror was yet to come. One spring morning, he invited the Stures to his court. He smiled, he made small talk, and then he attacked. Literally, he flew into a rage and personally stabbed Nils Sture in the chest, then calmly walked away, leaving the bleeding noble sprawled on the stone floor like a dropped goblet. The court gasped, the guards froze, and Eric, he just kept walking, muttering something about finally getting to the root of the rot. The murders that followed were not ordered with dignity or royal decree. They were carried out in panic chaos, a royal tantrum dressed in blood. Noblemen were dragged from their beds, interrogated at sore point, and executed without trial. When it was over, the halls were quiet, far too quiet, and Eric, he retreated to his chambers and didn't come out for days. From that moment, the nobility no longer whispered. They plotted, because this wasn't kingship. This was collapse. Eric had built a court around mirrors, shadows, and fear. And now, those mirrors were cracking. His advisors begged him to see reason. His own brothers began meeting in secret. And the people, they started calling him the Mad King. But Eric didn't care. He still believed he could rule, so long as he kept one eye open at all times. He would wander the palace at night, sleepless and suspicious, sometimes wearing full armor to bed. He had food tested, wine sniffed, and ceilings checked for traps. He no longer trusted locks, so he started sleeping in different rooms each night, just in case. And if anyone knocked on his door without warning, well, they were lucky to leave with both ears. This was not a man on a throne. This was a king in a castle of nightmares, surrounded by ghosts he created, haunted by enemies real and imagined, and still, he clutched his crown, not with dignity, but with trembling fingers and eyes that had seen too much. The Sture murders, when fear turned bloody. Now, imagine a royal dinner party, but not the kind where polite conversation and fine wine flow freely. No, this was a dinner tainted with suspicion and madness, where the shadows lurking behind the chandeliers seemed heavier than the gold on the plates. Eric XIV invited the Sture family, powerful nobles with bloodlines so noble it made Eric's crown feel just a little less secure. Now, these Stures hadn't committed any real crime. They hadn't plotted rebellion in secret basements or sent letters dipped in poison. Their only offense was having slightly more noble blood than the king himself liked. And in Eric's eyes, that was a crime enough. What followed wasn't politics. It wasn't even royal drama. It was the unraveling of mind, the collapse of a king into a human storm of paranoia and rage. At that ill-fated dinner, Eric accused his guests of treason, lunged at one with a knife like a man possessed, and ordered the execution of others with a frenzy that shocked even his most loyal guards. You can almost hear the whispers in the hallways afterward. The servants, sworn to loyalty, dared to murmur under their breath. Maybe the king isn't right in the head anymore. The crown wasn't just a symbol of power that night. It became a shackle, a weight too heavy for a mind spiraling out of control. Eric XIV didn't just lose his temper. He lost himself, tearing apart the very fabric of his kingdom with the blood of his own nobles. The fall, crown chains, and cold dungeons. After the Sture murders, Eric's reign didn't just stumble. It face-planted spectacularly into chaos. The king, who once wore the crown like a golden halo, found himself trapped in a nightmare of his own making. His brothers watched helplessly as Eric transformed from monarch to madman, from ruler to tragic figure, in a royal play no one wanted to star in. In a move as inevitable as winter's chill, they stepped in. The same men who had shared childhood games and royal lessons suddenly became jailers, stripping Eric of his crown, his freedom, and eventually his dignity. The throne slipped from his grasp like sand through trembling fingers, and Eric became a puppet on a string, deposed, locked away, briefly freed, and then locked away again. Imagine the cold stone walls of Orbius Castle, a prison for a king. Here, Eric paced endlessly, a caged lion trapped in a labyrinth of his own mind. His royal robes replaced by chains and shadows, his voice reduced to scribbles of poetry on scraps of parchment, sad verses penned in solitude, echoing the madness that consumed him. No more royal banquets, no more court intrigues, just silence, solitude, and the slow, grinding descent into oblivion. The king who once dreamed of grandeur was now a ghost haunting cold dungeons, his story unraveling one lonely step at a time. The death, arsenic, and silence. The final act in Eric XIV's tragic saga was as dark and mysterious as the shadows that clung to his prison walls. It was February 26, 1577, an ordinary day on the surface, but a day that would seal the fate of a king forgotten by the world, yet never quite forgotten by history. Imagine Eric, once the fiery monarch who set his kingdom ablaze with paranoia and blood, now a broken man in a cold, lonely cell. His crown long gone, his freedom shattered, his mind a fragile vessel teetering on the edge of madness and despair. The halls of Orbius Castle were silent, save for the slow drip of time and the occasional scrawl of his desperate poetry. Then came the soup. A simple bowl of pea soup, humble and unassuming, was brought to the captive king. But hidden beneath its innocent green surface lay a deadly secret. Arsenic, a poison silent yet swift, a final, cruel punctuation to a life marked by turmoil and tragedy. There was no grand battle, no last heroic stand. Instead, the poison slipped quietly into his veins, shutting down the fire that once raged within. Eric died dramatically, fittingly, surrounded by suspicion and whispers. No royal anthem played, no mournful choir sang his praises. His death was a whispered rumor in the corridors of power, a secret buried beneath layers of silence and fear. The poison was not just a substance. It was a symbol of a reign that ended not with glory but with betrayal, not with celebration but with quiet, poisonous finality. The king who once held the fate of a nation in his hands was reduced to a shadow, slipping away under the weight of arsenic and solitude.
So here we are, at the end of the tale. A man born to rule, taught to believe he was chosen by God himself, only to be undone by whispers, rebellions, and the very nobles who once bowed before him. He wasn't the first king to fall, and certainly not the last. But few fell quite like him, with so much drama, so much poetry, and so much misunderstanding. He died believing he was right, and maybe in some strange way he was, just not in a way that history or England had time for. His was a story written in gold leaf and torn parchment, a glittering tragedy collapsing under the weight of its own illusions. He gave us no heirs, but he left behind verses, regrets, and the eerie memory of a monarch who wanted to be a god, but ended up a ghost. And now, hey, are you awake? Or just floating, waiting to drift off? You probably had a long day. Before you close your phone or PC, tell me, what time is it for you? Midnight? 2 a.m.? Are you listening from the US, the UK, maybe somewhere further? Wherever you are, whatever crown you wear, whether it's a hoodie pulled tight over your head or just the invisible weight of your day, know that even kings fell asleep. See you soon. Better call sleep.